Coming up on today's Locked On Senators, the NHL trade deadline is only 8 days away. And after trading Nikita Zaitsev, we look at who some options could fit with the Sens' newly found cap flexibility.
And we have a very special guest. Ross, has been a long time coming, but finally, TSN's play-by-play announcer John Abbott joins the show.
And with 4 games in 5 nights starting Friday, the Sens enter the eye of the hurricane in Carolina. This is the Locked On Senators podcast. It's your team every day.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I'm Jake Sanderson, and you're listening to Locked On Senators podcast.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
And welcome inside episode 742 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Ross Levitan on the outskirts of enemy territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today is Thursday, February 23rd, and Pillzy, for only the last time until Saturday, it's Sens Game Days.
Oh, yeah. This has seemed like a long stretch, but we're not going to be worried about a long stretch for the rest of this month, as these games are fast and furious. And honestly, I'll say it, this back-to-back up against the Detroit Red Wings might be the 2 biggest games of the entire season.
I don't disagree with that, but you have to get one. Have to get one of Friday or Saturday. In Carolina tomorrow, John Abbott will be on the call. He's on the show later on. Great guy. Then in Montreal on Saturday, where you're going for the season sweep against your interprovincial rivals. So we'll see which one, if not both. I don't want to get too cocky. Pillzy, do you think 2 is realistic?
Between Carolina and Montreal? I think if you get 3 points out of those 2 games, you're happy. I'll say that.
We'll call that a win. I would call last night's trade a win. We're going to touch on the practice line, Senators on the ice in Carolina after the interview with John Abbott. But Pillzy, I need your take. We posted a bonus episode last night after the Senators traded Nikita Zaitsev along with their 2nd-round pick in this upcoming draft and a 4th-round pick in a draft that the kids who are going to be picked then are 14 years old right now, to the Chicago Blackhawks in exchange for future considerations. Your thoughts on the deal?
Well, this is something that it's been a long time coming, and I think Sens fans have known that. I think pretty well all along, we knew there was going to be a 2nd-round pick attached to moving Nikita Zaitsev. I think that was kind of fairly accepted. And I listened to your episode, you and Martian. You guys did a great job. I was disappointed I couldn't make it. I was at work, but that's the immediate reaction you get from the Locked On Senators podcast. But here's my thing is, this is something that I don't want to necessarily I definitely don't want to applaud Pierre Dorion for mopping up a mess that he caused just to save not holding Cody Ceci for 1 year, if you want to take things all the way back to how we got Nikita Zaitsev. But the thing is, this was a move out of 100% necessity. If they don't get Nikita Zaitsev off the books for this offseason, this team's screwed. And I've played around on cap friendly. I've tried, making everything work and fitting a new defenseman in and figuring out the goaltending. And there's not a lot of room left when you consider the salary that Alex DeBrincat is most likely going to command. So yes, it's great to get that $4.5 million off, but I don't think this necessarily translates to, okay, Zaitsev's gone. Now we can get a defenseman that's making $6+ million. I think it's going to be a little bit tighter than that.
And this summer, they have the Alex DeBrincat situation. Shane Pinto, is he a bridge guy? And you're already able, as of July 1st, to negotiate with Jake Sanderson on his next contract that doesn't expire until the end of the 2024 season. So I'm with you in that sense. I do think that Jacob Chychrun remains my most coveted piece with the 4.6 cap hit for 2 more years after this one. The only thing is lefties. How many can you have on a decor? Are you married to 3 lefties on the left side, 3 righties on the right side? And where's everybody going to get their minutes as well? But in terms of cost, I mean, I threw out on the top of my list at Sens Central, I just put out all the names that I've heard in touch with the Ottawa Senators. And you have a player who's not even on my list, who I want you to get to, but I'm just going to roll through because the top tier for me, and I put Erik Karlsson at the top, yeah, sure, to be a bit of a talker, a bit of a promo there is like, man, how great would the story of Erik Karlsson coming home be? I'm a sucker.
Stories cost money, Ross.
Stories cost money. Yeah, this one's not on the get rid of rack. It's not at the library. You could check out for free. This is a big time contract that would be coming back. Certainly, you hope money's retained if that is. But we don't have to spend much time on Erik Karlsson. If you want Mark Mathod's thoughts, we have that video on YouTube as well, where he talked about Erik Karlsson and where he might want to play. But I've also got Mackenzie Weegar and Jakob Chychrun. I explained Chychrun, just a great defensive defenseman, contract fits. Weegar, I think that's more of a pipe dream. If it was going to happen, it would have been at the draft. The Flames still in the mix, and an 8-year contract that doesn't kick in until next year. Pillzy, why don't you walk me through this middle tier and how you think of these players?
I think this middle tier, I'm not sold on Dumba, Ross, just because we've talked to our friend Seth Tupal from Locked On Wild, and he really gives the impression that the Minnesota Wild kind of can't wait to get rid of Dumba. And I don't know if that's the kind of player the Ottawa Senators are looking for. And I think he could command a decent dollar amount on his next contract.
That's why I have him. This is the meh tier, by the way. So these don't really excite me. But what's holding Dumba away from that bottom tier is if the price is right, he could be a rental. And you don't have money committed to him beyond this year. So if it's not for a big return, which Bill Guerin probably wants to make a hockey deal and get someone who can help his team make a push in the playoffs in the Central Division. So that's where it gets complicated. But if they're really trying to get rid of it to make that move elsewhere, then if I'm the Senators, I take a shot at him. I think that a change of scenery, a guy who's only ever played in one place, it would have to be a very low cost. Like, you know what? I'll say I would be happy with him for nothing more than they gave up for Travis Hamonic. And I know they're running out of draft picks here, but if they gave up a 3rd-round pick and Minnesota was happy to move that the rest of this year, I'd be happy to take that.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not at a spot where I'm interested in rentals. It just kind of makes me nervous. And I think Minnesota is honestly just going to let him walk. I think that's what we're going to see. They want his help. I don't think they're going to get what they want in return. And if they do, it's going to be because they're going to make a subsequent move right after. So that's a lot of balls up in the air for the Wild. I think Matt Roy and Sean Walker are great in this spot because they're low cost. They've got term. I think for the trade deadline, Ross, you're looking for low risk options that can help you out this season and beyond. I don't think a rental or a guy you're going to take a big gamble on and you're going to trade a lot of assets for right now makes sense. If the Sens were clearly in the hunt and not sniffing around, well, that changes things. But we're just sniffing around here. Let's be honest. It's still a ways to go here, but some help would do well. That's for sure for the rest of the season here.
Both of those players are on the LA Kings. Sean Walker is signed for next season at $2.65 as well. 28-year-old right shot defenseman. Matt Roy, right shot 27-year-old defenseman, is signed for $3.15 these upcoming seasons. But the player that you want to add, Pillzy, are you putting him in this middle tier at the top, or are you just as high on this guy as you are with the Jakob Chychruns and Mackenzie Weegar level player?
Oh, no, not at all. And I think that's why I'm glad I get an opportunity to talk about this. The player I have, and I guess we'll stop the tease, I'll just announce it because it's not a guy that's going to blow the minds of people. It's probably someone that people are going to have to check him out on Elite Prospects or do some Googling, but that's Matt Benning from the San Jose Sharks. And the reason I like him is, well, he's a right hand shot defenseman. He's got this year and 3 more years after at a cap hit of $1.3 million. He has over 400 NHL games played. He's a guy that can put up decent amount of points. Like I'm looking at his Elite Prospects right now. He's usually between 10 and 25 points. He's projected to get 30 points this season on a bad San Jose team. This is a guy that gives you low risk stability. He's not someone that's going to put you over the edge. He's not someone that is going to change this decor for a massive amount. He's someone that at $1.3 million for a couple years, and he's not that old either. He's only 28, so that's going to bring him into his early 30s. I think even if he's your 3rd pair right-hand shot defenseman, that's great value. And the Ottawa Senators need to find value right now more than they need to take gambles. That's been the problem with the Ottawa Senators is they take gambles on guys that have down years and they're like, oh, they're going to fix themselves in Ottawa. Well, that simply has not worked out or they've taken on bad contracts from teams like Nikita Zaitsev being like, well, maybe this will work. If not, we'll figure out how to get out of it down the road. And they can't be doing that. So where I think Matt Benning's contract is something very serviceable for this team. If you can have an NHL player playing decent minutes night in, night out at 1.3 million, that's pretty safe for me. And I think the San Jose Sharks are in a position where they could trade him. It wouldn't alter their roster too much, but they know the value of having a guy signed at that low AAV and a right-hand defenseman. So in conclusion, Ross, to wrap it up, Matt Benning is a guy I would put in the meh category. I would say probably ahead of Matt Roy and Sean Walker, just because it's a cheaper dollar amount. I'm not necessarily saying he's a better player, but that helps them manage this cap, because when you start looking at Alex DeBrincat, Shane Pinto, and Jake Sanderson's next contract, like Jake Sanderson, I don't know if they're going to be able to bridge him. Like, he could demand, like, think about how good he is right now. Think about him in 2 years, depending on when Dorion gets this deal done. I know you mentioned they could get it started.
Right, because he's got that classic NCAA thing where you come in, you burn a year right away. So that gives him less time to earn that second paycheck. I look at him as getting a Rasmus Dahlin-esque, maybe with inflation in the league, maybe at what Dahlin signed for a couple of years. He's a first overall pick. It was a 3-year deal at 6.5.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're looking at that range, and I would agree with you, I think we're going to see something similar to that. So if you're looking at that range, and let's just say conservatively, DeBrincat's making not $9 million. I'm not saying that's what he's going to get, higher or lower. Let's just say conservatively. You're already at $15 million there. And then Shane Pinto, you're probably going to look at between $2 and $3 million at least. So now you're looking at, you've got $18 million, not math guys here. Don't check my math here. But if my math is correct, you've now used up all your cap space on just bringing those, just keeping the guys you have.
Right, but I mean, with Jake Sanderson, that's 1 year down the road. Now we're looking at 2 years, right?
But I mean, Alex DeBrincat, Jake Sanderson, and Shane Pinto, those are guys you're going to want beyond 1 year down the road.
For sure, but after next season, the Sens will have about $5.1 million in dead money off the books. The Michael Delzato, the Bobby Ryan, and Matt Murray. So just between Bobby Ryan and Matt Murray, after not this season but next, they're going to be saving almost $3.6 million in that.
And there's your goaltender.
True. 100%.
Right? So you've now used up all your assets, just keeping the guys you have. And if you can get a goalie in the 3.5 million range, you're strapped. I know the cap might go up here, but that's when people are talking about acquiring defensemen that are making 6.5 million for the next 8 years. It sounds great, but you got to start working these things out. And that's why I think a guy like Matt Benning can have so much value. I think as long as he can be a good third pair defenseman, which isn't asking too much, at $1.3 million for the next couple of years, there's good value there. And I want to give our guy at Fighting Stutzla, Dylan, shout out for that. Yes, good old Newfoundland by. So he's the one that put me onto that trail, and I kind of did some digging and thought that would make sense. But I want to maintain this is not a move I think is going to change the Ottawa Senators franchise drastically. It's just something I looked at as maybe being a tidy piece of business that helps this team immediately and doesn't put them in a bad spot when you're trying to re-sign those RFAs coming up here.
I think that was well said. Let us know in the comments. The way I'll respond quickly, because we got to get to John Abbott. I'm so excited for you all to hear this interview. If that's a subsequent move and they're able to move on from Nick Holden, I would be thrilled. And Nick Holden's making 1.3 this year. I know you added term in Matt Benning, but I still think that Dorion, remember that he's got his job hanging in the balance with new ownership coming in. He needs to show that he's looking to actively improve and get this team over the hump. They're sniffing around. And I think that would be a good second move to shore up the back end. But I still think they have to aim higher than that. They have to aim, like, even you mentioned that you'd have Benning ahead of Matt Roy and Sean Walker. I'd put him right in the middle of them. But I think that he would have to be a second one. We'll see. And I mean, you did a good sell job on him for me. And it's got to be less grenades, though, in his own zone. I remember he had a bad giveaway in the game in Ottawa earlier this year. So he's not immune to the odd mistake. And I mean, that's what you need to, even if it's a good value play at low million. The Senators just got rid of a few mistakes from the back end. I want a safe defenseman would be my number one priority as Jacob Chychrun.
Those are hard to find.
Continues to be a healthy. He's got 2 more years at 4.6. Pillzy, how much money was Nikita Zaitsev making this year next?
Yeah, 4.5. But are you willing to give up a first round prospect and either Pinto or Greg? That's what the price is for Chychrun.
Frank Saravalli reporting recently, a couple days ago, that the price could be 2 first-round picks or a first-round pick and a subsequent level.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
I'd probably do 2 first-round picks, but the thing is, the Senators aren't trading their first rounder this year. I don't think they should anymore. Especially, they just traded their second and third.
Yeah,
3 sevenths though.
That's what I wanted to get into too, though, is I was so disappointed when the trade finalizations happened and it was this year's pick, because if it was next year's Washington Capitals, I'm talking about 2024, I would have been a lot happier with that, because this is supposed to be a deep draft, and Ross, selfishly, we like to cover the top 64 prospects. If the Ottawa Senators only have one pick in that range, it's tough for us, as much as we love covering prospects.
Yeah, love of the game for sure. Hey, talk about love of the game. How about starting to cover this team this world of broadcast media at 16 years old, knowing that that's what you wanted to do? That was John Abbott. So coming up on the show, we're going to chat with John about his rise through the ranks of play-by-play, and then we're going to wrap up the show with line combos, practice going on in Carolina as we speak ahead of tomorrow's game against the Hurricanes. You're listening to Locked On Senators.
And today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. They are the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sportsbook in North America, and official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Is that good? Yeah, sign me up for that. And what I love about them is their app is awesome. For everyone in Ontario, you already know this. It's simple, safe, secure, easy to use. I usually check it every day just to see if they got any fun promos or anything that I see some good value on, Ross. You know I'm all about value. And if you like value, our friends down in the United States, if you start today, you can get $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's awesome. All you got to do is sign up at fanduel.com/lockedon. They got all your favorite bets, whether you're a money line, point spread, player prop guy. You can do same game parlays for a bigger chance at a bigger payout. Just go to fanduel.com/lockedon. Don't forget $5 to get $150 in free bets, win or lose. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Today's episode is also brought to you by the GLEBE Central Pub. They're your neighborhood pub, and they're in the heart of the Glebe. That's 779 Bank Street. And even if you're not in the Glebe as a resident, they certainly make you feel at home at the GLEBE Central Pub. Whether it's battle bots, whether it's speed dating, whether it's trivia, whether it's live music, they've got it all at the GLEBE Central Pub. They also have frosty cold beers, $7.75 for a Guinness every Friday. You kidding me? Sign me up after a long week at the office. The GLEBE Central Pub is the perfect place to go before you head down to Lansdowne, whether you're going to a movie or to see the 67s. It's always a great spot to fuel up at the GLEBE Central Pub. Get the wings, get the buffalo chicken wrap, you name it, and you're going to have a good time at the GLEBE Central Pub. Check them out at 779 Bank Street. Make sure you let them know that Locked On Senators sent you. Say hi to Dave for us, all the beauties that work at the GLEBE Central Pub. It's the GLEBE Central Pub. Let them know Locked On Senators sent you. Now let's get to our interview with one of the voices of Ottawa Senators hockey. It's John Abbott. All right, we now welcome on a very special guest. It's long overdue, but we are very pleased to be joined by John Abbott, one of the voices of your Ottawa Senators. And if that voice sounded familiar when he came on board with TSN 5, that's because way back when he was covering the 67s. Johnny, welcome to Locked On Senators. How you doing today, man?
Oh, boys, I am so pumped to be on the program and love what you do. I know we had to catch up earlier, but I love the grind of you guys putting it out every single day. And yeah, fantastic to join you today. I'm pumped. It's one day away from Sens Game Day.
Yeah, it's a big 4-5 coming up. Hey, when you call multiple games in a week, what's the secret to keeping your voice fresh?
Well, as long as it doesn't get as bad as the 2017 World Juniors, where I nearly lost it for the gold medal game. I was drinking everything, including apple cider vinegar, which is, I don't advise that. That is some nasty stuff. But yeah, you know what? You just try to take care of yourself the best as you can. Drink lots of orange juice, maybe. I don't have any really big secrets for you other than, rest and try and stay out of the elements as much as possible. Make sure you can get in the seat and not let anything drop off.
And Athletic Greens, right, Pillzy?
That's right.
Yeah, that's always good. Are you a big tea guy? I know a lot of broadcasters they swear by the tea because you still get that caffeine, but the coffee sometimes dehydrates you. So I think a lot of guys are switching to tea.
You know what? It's funny you take me back to 67 days, and I wasn't a coffee drinker before starting to take those bus trips, and quickly became one through the press rooms. So I like to do a little mix there, Pills. I do. I like to get the coffee in me to get the juices flowing, and then hit the tea with a little honey and maybe a lemon if there's one kicking around. So yeah, there's nothing new in the broadcast booth, but you hope that you don't suffer from that laryngitis or the sore throat, because that's just the worst feeling ever for sure.
Well, according to your bio here on TSN, our crack research team discovered that you wouldn't have been able to put any whiskey in that drink for 3 years from when you started broadcasting. Is it true you started when you were 16 years old?
I did. Yeah, it was much more behind the scenes for the most part then, but fooled the folks with the London Knights to give me a chance to show up and be part of their broadcast each and every Friday night, most of the home games. And the Canada Summer Games were on at that time too. So yeah, I was able to ply my trade with local cable, and man, that helped me tenfold just to get to know the industry, to get to know the ins and outs. And I always appreciate, from that day on, actually, always appreciate how much hard work goes into behind the scenes, because it's the people you don't see that get us on the air and make us look good and do all the hard work for sure.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And that's a worthy shout out. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. So I definitely respect that. And so Ross mentioned you got started early. John, when did you know you wanted to be a broadcaster? Was there like a eureka moment? Was that always what you were going for, or how did it all unfold?
Well, perhaps like both of you and maybe some watching this, I had the knack to not shut up. So that was a good starting point. Many teachers will tell you that I talked way too much. So I guess when you have that opportunity to continue to do that and do it for a living, you always, point yourself in that direction. But yeah, it's something I've always wanted to do. I'll take you even further back. Try not to make this too long, but that's what happens when you're talking to a play-by-play guy, I guess. But yeah, I hopped in the car with my dad many road trips as a youngster and had the tape recorder going. Nice. And would do sportscasts back in the day too. So yeah, it's right from elementary school. That's what I wanted to do, and chase the dream pretty hard, and very, very fortunate every day to wake up and be able to do it.
What part of the country did you grow up in? You said London Knights was deep southern Ontario?
Yeah, you got it. That was the old stomping grounds. That was, basically the hometown team at that point. So that's where I originated. Elmer, Ontario officially. And I had to mind myself coming to Ottawa because Elmer right across the river would put me into a different kind of discussion. I did take French and I admire it, but I can't quite hold my own in a back and forth like that. So, yep. Right around the London area for sure.
So if Nick St. Pierre goes down, you're not filling in doing the French broadcast?
No, not for 3 periods anyway.
That's awesome. So when you bounced around, how'd you get to Ottawa originally? Because I remember listening to you on the radio way back when, and you must have been just coming up as well with the 67. So how did that move take place?
You know what? And not to throw too many darts on the map to follow the travels here. I was really fortunate, as I said, to get in with London. That kind of led me to the Toronto St. Michael's Majors back when they were playing closer to the downtown.
Was Eugene Melnick the owner of the team?
Yeah, he was. Yep, at that time. Yep, Dave Cameron was coaching one of those years too. So Bob Jones actually was on the bench with him as well. So lots of old connections there. That's a small world. You guys know that. It's part of the great. I think it's the great side of hockey, but some may disagree. But that opportunity led me back to London. So kind of bounced around a little bit. Kane, Gagne, and Kostitsyn were the line at that time. So not too bad. And all 100-plus point guys in the OHL. And then Dave Schreiber came knocking one day and said, "Abs, I'm filling in when Dean's doing TV. Would you be interested in coming to Ottawa?" And I jumped at it, and it was the best decision I ever made. And at that time, Ottawa was my second home, and just so happy. It's almost surreal to be back, to be honest with you.
Because you were out, did you go from the 67s out to Vancouver? Were there a couple stops in between from there?
I ended back up in Toronto with the Marlies, actually, and that kind of opened the door professionally for me. And then filled in for Bonesy for a season. He was doing the same thing that Dean was doing. He was jumping back and forth between TV and radio back when you could do that, and then out to Vancouver with the Canucks for almost just over 7 years. So quite a stint out there, and then right back to Ottawa. Man, I can still remember coming back, driving the Parkway again, and just being feeling like, oh, I can't believe I get to do this. This is unbelievable.
You basically took the same path that a player would take from time to time, right? Where you came up through junior, you had to go and play your trade in the minors, go around all country, and then make your way back to where it all started. That's an awesome come up story. Now, I want to get into the broadcast itself, and a couple friends of the show have been on, and Jamie McLennan, one of them. I know you and him call games often. What's it like being able to bounce things off? Like, I mean, the TSN crew, top to bottom's money with Dave Poole and Mike Johnson. I don't want to miss anyone, but like you got all these great
Cheryl Pounder,
but I mean color commentators more than the analysts. So how does it change based on who's with you? Do you try to like throw more goalie stuff at Noodles and maybe more off ice player stuff for MJ? Like how do you alter how you throw commentary to them based on who it is?
Well, I can use and you're bang on, Ross, with that ideology. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And I would echo what you just said as well about, having so many talented people to work with. It's just unbelievable. It doesn't matter who's in the seat. Dave Poulin is another favorite of mine. And really, you go across the board, and we're all so lucky. It makes the play-by-play job pretty easy, actually, when you have so many talented people to work with. And I love sharing the booth with Gord, too. He's just first class and everything. He's been really good to me. So I got to throw some love for Gord Miller in there, too. But sadly, we were part of the game that Forsberg ripped both knees apart, which I've never seen before in my life, which is just absolutely crazy. And obviously, we knew something was really wrong at the time, but didn't know how bad it was. But then when you have Jamie McLennan, you can relate to what position a goaltender's in, like Forsberg was, stretching out, and kind of what that feels like, and not to narrow down and try and play doctor, but just to give people a sense of, well, yeah, your leg locks up and someone sits on you, it's going to be bad news. So yeah, you throw in, too bad we had to do it in that type of a setting, but you throw in different anecdotes based on who's with you for sure. And they all have a lot of good stories. They're all tremendous people. And, whether it's MJ Pooley or Jamie McLennan, it's fantastic to get in the booth with them.
Yeah, we love pretty much every TSN crew. It's always a blessing when you see the broadcasts on TSN as opposed to the opposite.
Yeah, we're not afraid to go out and say it. Just look at our guest history and shout out Kyle Bukowskis, great guy. But otherwise, we're Team TSN for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Now, what would you say is the toughest part about being a play-by-play announcer? I think a lot of people that aren't really in media or broadcasting, they're like, well, you just say what you see. It can't be that difficult, right? Like, what would you tell that average fan that is something a little bit more intricate than what they think a play-by-play announcer is?
Well, on one hand, I'm not digging ditches for a living, so I certainly respect the fact that, yeah, it's a lot different than other professions, and you show up and talk, so I get that, and you're right, it's not quite a manual labor position in that regard, but yeah, it's probably a little bit more difficult than people think. The speed of the game, you'll notice it. Just plop yourself down in a seat in the Canadian Hockey League and the OHL maybe for a 67s game, then if you can get to Belleville, go watch a Sens game, and then go watch an NHL game. You'll notice the speed at all three levels is ridiculously separated, obviously with the best in the world being the fastest of that too. So the way the game moves these days presents probably the biggest challenge when you're just trying to keep up. And then, outside of identifying players on the fly and making the plays that you see come to life for everybody that's watching from afar, you try and grab your cadence, grab your pacing, and kind of paint the picture or sing a song with it, so to speak. Make it sing is kind of a descriptive phrase we use in the business a little bit. You don't want it to sound good and have a bit of a pacing to it. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that go into it. And the more seat time, the better, just like anything you do in life. The more practice you have at it, the more you're going to excel at it. And to be. You guys mentioned the talent we have at TSN, and I'm happy to boast about it as well with the people we work with. But you talk about good comparables. I mean, when you have Gord Miller to look up to, and previously Chris Cuthbert, two of the best in the business, it's a lot of watching and listening what those guys do too to try and own your craft.
Have you ever go ahead, Pils?
I just have a quick follow-up too. Do you ever have stuff prepared? Like if you're like for a big milestone goal, like I don't know, throwing out Claude Giroux's 1,000th point or whatever. Like, are you going to have some
Buffalo.
sort of line prepared for that kind of moment, or are you fully, I'm just going to feel the moment type of thing? I've always been interested in that aspect of it.
Great question.
Oh, you had a very good question. And there's two instances that come to mind right away. One of them was this season. We were sitting on the Ovechkin milestone, potentially, right? With 801 and 802. And he came pretty close. Sonny Milano ended up putting it in. And it wasn't the cleanest look. So you always pray that, okay, just let it be a clean shot so you could see it and pump it up. But I had something in the hamper for that one. It's easy to get carried away and want to go on with a big dramatic call and stuff all the information in there. And like in this case, he's chasing Gretzky's pass and how, and you want to put all the information in. And yet sometimes it's those condensed calls, the more simple calls where you have a couple of words or one phrase and you just punch it that people seem to remember. So yeah, you're cognizant of it. You do want to go in the moment and feed off the emotion, whatever that may be. So maybe sometimes you scrap what you have in mind, but I think it's always better to be prepared just in case, because usually if it's well thought out, it comes out still naturally, as opposed to, maybe you don't want any takebacks on those big moments, right? You want to be able to hit it and recognize, there's 31 other guys in the league that want that call as well. So you got to do everybody justice, and you have respect for everybody that wants to do it too.
What's the best call you've had? The one that you're most proud of?
Oh, right now, missing Ovechkin, that would have been so fun. And actually, Crosby had a milestone. He didn't hit it last year in Ottawa. He ended up getting it the next game in Philly. But he had a milestone that he was working on too. But I'd say the 2020 World Juniors in Czechoslovakia, or the Czech Republic, Czechia now, just Canada winning gold. Like it doesn't get any better than that,
wasn't it?
It was crazy.
Yeah, that was Lafreniere against the Russians, and they were going. Was that? I don't know if it was overtime, but either way, that was a back and forth game. I remember feeling like they were down and out, and then battling back. Yeah,
Akil Thomas, played hero,
cool.
And I mean, anytime you're put in a position to be able to call a game like that, it's going to be special. And then, I mean, it doesn't get any better calling it to Canada coast to coast to be able to relay that information, a little golden nuggets. So yeah, I'd have to say that's probably my favorite to this point, and lots of other fun ones along the way too.
And am I right that you were calling the 2021 World Juniors as well, where nobody else was in the building?
I shared the broadcast, actually. Yes. So we were expecting our third at the time, and because of the bubble situation, it was a little tricky as to how I would get in and out. So it was actually myself and Blake Price working that one. Very unique. They had a lot more of the hoops to jump through than I did. So I wasn't tip to tail on that one. But, anytime you get to work the World Juniors, it's, again, it's just you pinch yourself with the opportunity you're put into, and you just hope that everything you do comes to life for everybody listening in.
And to kind of almost translate that into the Senators, did you know in that tournament that Tim Stützle was going to be the real deal? Because, I mean, he dominated that game.
You know what? I'll go back to the 2021 as well. So both of those, I think we saw Tim Stützle. I think everybody on the world stage was aware of what he could do in 2021. I think he put his mark on it. But the year before, Germany was playing to avoid relegation, guys. And I've never seen more scouts in the stands watching that type of game at the tournament than I did. And listen, Mo Seider was playing, and JJ Peterka, and so you had some other guys that were part of that German team. But Stützle was doing it back then too. It's just they were in a coming out party, I guess, saving the best for the next tournament. But yeah, those two for sure were like the first wow moments, and then I mean, what a joy to watch, right, fellas? Like, what a joy to watch. He's a point better than he was last year with 27 fewer games. And you still feel like this might not even be his best season. Like, the best is still ahead for him.
So we need you to help us out. When he does something ridiculous down the stretch, I need a Timmy Superstar reference. I need it like I need air to breathe, Abs. You don't have to credit us. You don't need anything. I need what a play from Timmy Superstar. I need it.
All right. Hey, if Noodles is on board and Meth's on board, which I can only assume they
We'll
are,
talk to them.
then you know what? We'll get the committee together. Let's do it. I like the catchphrase.
All right.
Very nice.
We
Nicely
called it the
done.
day before the draft. So, I mean, we've had a lot of bad takes on this show. So when we hit a home run, we're going to make sure everybody knows about it every day for the rest of the time.
I like no bad takes. No bad days, no bad takes.
I love that.
Yeah,
Hey,
throw
no
it out
risk,
there.
no fun is the way we look at it. Thanks to Timmy. But Pillzy, what else you got for Abs? I feel like we got some more Sens stuff for him.
Oh, of course. So you're a guy that's watching the Sens closely. You get to see them very often here. Ross and I'm still flip-flopping on this, but the trade deadline to me is going to be absolutely fascinating for the Ottawa Senators. Where are you at with what Pierre Dorion might accomplish this deadline?
Oh boy, it's interesting, isn't it? Because take you back to that game where Forsberg and Sanderson go down, and you're thinking, okay, does that completely change the direction of this team? And yet you throw in Mandalese and you throw in Sogard and some pretty good efforts, and this team is still kind of in it. So you look at the game that's coming up against Carolina as a big one, yes, but I think the real two, the back-to-back with Detroit, like the makeup game from before the Christmas break, and then the game the next night that was originally scheduled, the 27th, 28th of February, if I'm not mistaken. So those two might really dictate what the Sens do, but I like the idea of kind of what Detroit's been saying too, funny enough, is we want these guys to push as hard as we can. If they get in, we want them to experience it. Like, we'd rather have them do that. So I'd be okay if Pierre Dorion's aggressive. I'd be okay if this team sets itself up, but not losing an eye to the future. So that's really easier said than done. It even sounds hard. I wouldn't want that job to have to sort that out. But I think when I think of the Sens of the trade deadline, if I think of adding, I think of trying to be in on a player where you might not have as many other teams phoning about the same guy. And I don't know how easy that is, but in other words, if they're getting into a competition, they have to up the stakes and maybe they have to part with something or someone that they don't really want to. Man, that might get more difficult for people to stomach. But if they can identify a player that maybe is easier for them to bring in at the price that they feel comfortable paying, then I'm all for that. I think it'd be great to see this team push and push and push right to the final game.
Yeah, we would also like a little bit of a push here, as Ross and I are tired of covering a rebuilding team. Let's just say that. But speaking of trades, how do you feel about the Zaitsev trade? I think a lot of Sens fans, it might be divided. Some Sens fans being like, oh, wow, that's a lot to give up just to get rid of a guy that you basically took on for Toronto, and the whole Cody Ceci, Connor Brown issue will make your head spin. But now let's just focus. He's gone. That's off the books. What do you think that's going to help Pierre Dorion do? Or do you think there's an immediate plan now that Zaitsev is off the books?
Oh, it's one you wrestle with too, isn't it? Because you think of the second rounder and go, well, maybe you could use that as currency in a different deal. Now that's off the board. But at the same time, the things that we don't know, was how big was the negotiation with Chicago that they want to have the option? I've certainly read and listened to and heard a lot about, well, couldn't you do this, wait till the season ends, go through that off-season contract, mile markers that he's going to be hit, and then either buy him out or do something different on a cheaper level. Well, maybe the Blackhawks negotiated this trade for that very reason, for themselves to be able to put themselves in a position to do that, where, okay, they like him, they keep him, they don't, they have options, right? So there's always finer points than, on the inside of a trade than certainly the outside. And I've learned that through watching lots of people break down trades. So we never really know the whole backroom discussions, but it's fun to talk about. And yeah, it seems like a lot to give up, but it also, guys, I don't know about you two, but it feels like it's setting the table for something bigger. And I know there's always DeBrincat money to keep in mind, but I do think this is a precursor to another move. That's just my gut feel.
The Chicago Blackhawks won 3 games in a row and said we got to stop that. But in all seriousness, what do you think the funnier compensation is? A 6th round or 4th round pick in 3 years from now, or a 7th round pick that turns into a 6th round pick if they win 1 round? Like, what's the funnier condition on that?
Yeah, it's almost as good as the other side. Future considerations, like, okay.
Sens are loading up on it, man. From the Matt Murray trade and now this one, we've got
future considerations pending. Yes, yeah, I'm excited to cash those in.
I hope that's a phone call. That's a favor, down the road. I hope that's what that means. Like, okay, we'll call you up. I know bump us up to the top of the list when we're looking for player X or player Y or something. So, yeah, I know it's not quite the CHL where you're trading picks from 9 years down the road, but yeah, I did have a good chuckle at those two because it all matters to somebody somewhere, but it's interesting to get your head around those sometimes.
So funny, man. Well, hey, from funny to intense, this race for the wild card in the East, 2 teams are going to make it. 7 are in the mix. Who are you handicapping as the favorites right now? That's the final question for me, Abs. I'm leaving you with a tough one.
Oh, man, that is a tough one. It's hard to look past the Metro. It really is. There's so many teams that seem like they might even do more. You'd love to see, all of us would love to see, we're attached to calling games for a team that's going to be in the hunt, right? So you'd love to see Ottawa ratchet up there. I think they have the opportunity to make it interesting, but yeah, man, if you ask me, I think the Metro is going to be a tough one to knock out on both counts, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is going to be tough, that's for sure. Now, final question for me, John, is what's been your favorite storyline this season for the Ottawa Senators? I mean, say what you want about the team's performance, but there's been storylines left, right, and center. Ross and I always say, never a dull day in Sens land. And I'm just curious, from someone that covers the team as closely as you do, what's been your favorite storyline to cover?
Oh, wow, man. There's been a lot of great ones, hasn't there? I think collectively it's just seen the young core turn another corner and do it quickly. It feels like ages ago that Tim Stützle wasn't going to play down the middle, right? And here he is. He is in all his glory. Timmy Superstar is shining bright, boys.
Doesn't it roll off the tongue nice?
It does.
Come on,
it does.
And you got to have the umlaut on the U. I know that's not really an announcer's worry, but just for spelling clarification, the umlaut is important.
Gotcha.
You can pronounce it with the umlaut.
I'll drop the little 2 on there.
There you go.
That's a good one. I like it. Yeah, just thinking of as good of a year that Tkachuk had last year and Stützle had last year, and when you say promising future, when you see the groundwork laid for a core that's going to compete, when you see fan favorites and ultimately maybe franchise favorite players perform like they did this year, that's what you hope, but you don't really know how it's going to come to fruition. And then you see this season take place and you think, okay, this is, again, just a jumping off point. Like Brady could be a 30-30 guy every season, it looks like, right? And Tim Stützle in a position to succeed against the game's best now. And then you had Josh Norris, hopefully when he's recovered and healthy, and all of a sudden, 3 lines with Pinto getting his feet wet this season, it becomes a lot different. So I think the promise of what's to come, as tough as it is maybe this season to say that again, probably is my favorite storyline, with just how well the core has performed, because these guys are still young. You don't want to say it anymore. They're not rookies by any means, but it's still a young group coming together. And I think they've proven now to themselves as well this season that with the right mix of players, they can beat any team in the National Hockey League.
I love that answer, John. And the hopeful best storylines are still to come. It's Johnny Superstar from TSN 5. We appreciate your time, man. Looking forward to hearing you on the call tomorrow when the Senators take on Carolina. And I can promise you, we're going to be knocking at your door to be back on the show sooner rather than later. Appreciate your time, John, and we'll do it again soon.
Oh, love it. Anytime, guys. And thanks for putting me up from the Pearson Airport on the way. Lots of Toronto people getting up to date with Sens talk right now. So I'm getting some Getting some evil eyes over here. Thanks, boys.
Stick taps to John for joining us. Absolute beauty. Great guy. Can't wait to get him back on next time on Locked On Senators. Pillzy, the Sens are back on the practice ice, and as John Abbott is currently in the air heading to broadcast tomorrow's game in Carolina, the Hurricanes present an extremely tough task.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that I think a lot of people argue that they don't have one true superstar, but they've got a lot of depth. I mean, all the way down their lineup, this is a good squad that the Ottawa Senators are going to really have to play their A game if they have any chance, Ross. I think for this game, we'll get into it more tomorrow on our preview, but you're really hoping for the 1 point here. If you can take them past regulation, I'll be happy with that.
Yeah, I agree with you. You mentioned earlier in the show, 3 points out of 4 would be key this weekend. You're just hoping to play them tough, but I did see a few highlights floating around the internet of when the Senators won in Carolina in the Hamburglar run. You remember it was in overtime with 14 seconds left, and Kyle Turris goes between his own legs to get around the defender. Both guys are puck-watching Turris, and he goes between all their legs, and Mark Stone finishes the game with 12 seconds remaining.
Beautiful.
So that gave me some delusion right there. The Hamburglar run always does, but the Sens don't win in Carolina very often either. So you'll take whatever you can get. Although I believe they're on a 1-game win streak down there. Didn't they win there last year with Forsberg? That was like the start of his unbelievable game. Second half of back-to-back.
Yeah, I think we called that was one of those quasi-revenge games, if I remember correctly.
Yes, sir. I'm actually going to pull that up right now because the Carolina Hurricanes, they don't lose much at home. And that's a testament to how Rod Brindamore coaches the team. Makes sure they're always coming out going. Anton Forsberg with a 47 save performance in a 3-2 win last season in Carolina. The 5-15-1 Senators beating the 15-6-1 Carolina Hurricanes. So I guess the Sens only win in Carolina when they're completely down and out. But at least we'll get to see this team after practice under their belt. Stützle between Tkachuk and Giroux, Pinto between DeBrincat and Batherson, Ridley Gregg centers Derek Brassard and Julien Gauthier, and Dylan Gambrell will play in between Mathieu Joseph and Austin Watson. On defense, Chabot, Zub, Sanderson, Hamonic, and Brandstrom is with Nick Holden after the Zaitsev trade. Talbot is in the starters end. Pillzy, what are you expecting to see from Cam Talbot in his return? First game in a long time.
This is going to be interesting for Cam Talbot for sure. I think he probably was close to being ready in the last game, Ross, but not quite there. So I think this break will have done him some good. Hopefully he gets a good practice in. But as much as we love seeing what Sogard and Kevin Mandolese were able to do in a small sample size, and I'm not taking anything away from them, but it's really important to have Cam Talbot back, in my opinion, especially leading up to this trade deadline, because he's their biggest trade piece. But they need to decide whether they think they should trade him or keep them as, I'm using quotations, their own rental here, right? So I think that's going to be the most interesting storyline in the next week or so here.
We'll continue into those storylines tomorrow. Mark Mathot will join us in all likelihood. An early drop tomorrow on a Friday game day. The Senators play Friday, Saturday, Monday, Tuesday. So buckle up. This is the meaningful games that we were promised. It's a little early. It's February. Well, let's do the most with it. We'll talk tomorrow. For Brandon Piller and for Johnny Abbott, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been the Locked On Senators podcast. Your team every day.